Stimulus is the word. Tomorrow we will learn more about the July stimulus package. Parts of the travel and tourism industry have put in demands for long-term support. In the case of inbound tourism, that means right through till April of next year. We do not know whether those sort of terms will extend to either the inbound or the outbound travel industry, but certainly government policy has done neither any favours over the past weeks and months.
Travel agents earn their money when consumers pay their balances. So for the rest of this year, all the agents I'm talking to at the minute would say, hey, there's nothing happening until the end of 2020. But really, we have to extend that to the end of the first quarter until we see some money coming back in and our margins on our business coming back into the business. It's a difficult one. And what I'm seeing is agents have dealt with and are still dealing with a lot of the existing bookings that were there. Coming to an end to that, they're looking down the track and saying, there's not a lot of bookings in the future. So how are we going to cope with that?
We all thought it'd be all over by now. And I think even amongst our friends or whatever, we thought life would go back to normal and it hasn't. There's still a huge level of frustration in terms of the agents. The government, as you know, haven't given any type of clear advice. And even if we do get a green list, if they don't change the non-essential travel, it means people still can't go because they're not going to be insured.
There won't be any return on that until possibly April time. So it's from now until the end of the first quarter of 2021. We need assistance for that long period of practically 9 months. It's a unique situation. Has to be looked at favourably by the government.
It is now past mid-July. The summer is no longer to play for. Most travel agents have written off the season of 2020 and are wondering about next March. Will there be any business between now and then?
2020 is a write-off?
Certainly, I think until we get some sort of green list and the non-essential ban lifted. And if we get that, possibly the back end of the year to the Canaries. But, other than that, I think we really have to start looking at 2021.
And while there's lots of focus on the so-called green list, it's becoming increasingly an irrelevance. The number of flights through Dublin Airport ranges between 80 and 100, and each day of this week 11,000 passengers will pass through the airport. People are becoming increasingly comfortable with travel and what they find when they get to foreign countries.
I think that our own government, we need to make sure that we look at all the data that is available, and that we can't be in the position where, in the absence of guidance, those espousing opinions, the general public, take that as de facto government legislation. And that is very damaging. We can't be in that position. The government needs to say what can and can't, what they recommend should and should not be done, rather than leave it to those who don't. They just can't have all the facts to data that a government would have. And I think that's very important for the country, because if we don't do that, what we will see is people continue to travel, and they may travel to places we don't want them to go.
It's car crash stuff. It's, they can't have it. They can't have it every way. If they don't want people to travel, they're going to have to compensate them.
What we can see, we track our fleet every morning where it's flown to. What's clear is that when governments in various parts of the world give advice of where they want people to travel and not to travel, for the most part, it is really followed pretty tightly. But when you don't give guidance, then you may end up having people coming into a country from where you don't necessarily want them, or your own citizens going to places you don't want them to go.
It's quite clear that NPHET's agenda, and as promoters of public health, they are within their rights on this, is to keep the list of acceptable countries as small as possible.
The more movement there is of people, the higher the likelihood of an issue arising again in this country. And that includes movement within the country. There
are only 11 countries with a lower infection rate than Ireland. And because NPHET want that on a rolling 14-day average, if you go back to Friday, there would just be 8. And there's also the question of treating large countries as one region, which seems to be the policy. If you were to strip the Algarve out of Portugal, it would make the list. Portugal as a whole country would not. The Canary Islands would be the third best in Europe in terms of rolling infections over the last 14 days, just behind Malta and Finland.
With all of the PR that the government have put around not travelling, I think even if flights were to resume at this stage, and we did get a green list of countries and we did get the ban lifted, people are afraid at this point in time. I think if we are to look, to new business, we've got to start looking at the back end of this year, and we really have to start looking at 2021. Because I think even if the government lift the restrictions now, people are going to be a little bit afraid.
As it stands, there are 4 significant Mediterranean countries on the list that are guaranteed. They are Malta, Cyprus, Greece and Italy. All the others will depend completely on how the Irish government chooses the data. Do they keep the European average of 20, which would include Spain, or do they not?
I just don't, I despair as to where the planning is. I just don't see any joined up thinking in this whatsoever.
Have big implications for travel insurance.
We're expecting the Department of Foreign Affairs to advise to lift the all but essential travel. If they don't and they still send out a green list, then there's obviously confusion out there for travellers.
Whether we go from level 3, which is against all essential travel, back to level 2, which is travel with caution.
We need to speak with our underwriters about seeing if they're going to allow the policy to be active as a result of the all but essential travel still being in place.
Different signals coming out of the Cabinet on that.
Even with the green list, we'd prefer people not to be going there on their holidays. That's why we're unequivocal that for this year, green list or no green list, we do not want people going overseas.
I think the other frustrations that are still there at the moment are that refunds are not coming through as quickly as they thought they would. So there still is an issue around refunds and when they will actually receive the money.
My name is Owen Corrie. Travelwrap is commissioned by the Irish Travel Agents Association. The views here are my own.